then you add the whole social culture of you're overreacting, you're taking it too personally, you're being too sensitive, get over it, stop worrying about it, you've got an overactive imagination, you're just being weird. That I agree, there's a way in which between ancestral trauma, karmic trauma, and social pressure to not be magical and to not be sensitive, there's also that tension around being empathic, where I think a lot of us really do try to shut that down.
Welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna Podcast. This podcast is meant to encourage you to connect within so you can share your light with the world. And now, here's your host, Harrison Ma.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. This is your weekly installment of your inner connection to your outer expression, where I, your host Harrison, here with the beautiful guest that I get to dance with and flow with, set the intention of pulling back the layers, restricting health, alignment, and love. And today's episode is like all the others, but with its own individual twist, with the beautiful heart that I get to speak with today. But before I get to her soul and her magic, a quick little reminder: if you're new to this podcast today, welcome. I'm excited to have you. If you are a returning follower, a returning part of the family, we love you very much and we thank you for being here. Remember that you can share this episode out to your friends, your family members, your lovers in the world. If you get some value, go over to Apple and Spotify, leave your love if you gain some gems. And if you're looking for more tribe now, I recently, a couple of weeks ago, started the Cosmic Love Antenna Facebook tribe and family. So go over there, join the group, and I would love to have you. All right. With all that foundation, I want to introduce the beautiful Jennifer Moore that I have on the show today as a guest. Jennifer is a empathic mentor. She's an EFT master trainer and founder of the Empathic Mastery Academy. I think you're getting an idea of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to get into all things, being an empath as a superpower, leaning into this beautiful gift and what it means, the understanding of boundaries and all these sort of elements, the role of trauma in being an empath, the individualized expression of this beautiful gift, and so much more. Jennifer, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Harrison, thank you so much for having me. I am delighted to be here. I'm sure we're going to have an amazing dance and conversation.
Me too, my friend. And it's morning for me here in Australia, and this is my witching hour. Technically it was a couple hours ago, right? But for me, this is where my spirit is so active, and having you here, I'm already feeling a lot coming through. So I'm excited for what we're going to talk about. Let's start. Let's ground before we go into the depths. Jennifer, I'd love to introduce you a little bit to the people listening. We're going to talk about all of your beautiful skills and insights, but before we do that, how I like to start the show is getting a little bit of a background of who you are. And I think I like to do that through the pain teacher. And this is usually an event or a series of events that has really led you to the beautiful work that you do in the world right now. So when I ask that question, what bubbles up to the surface?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is that for me, there have been many incremental experiences in my life that have been my teachers. So where some people might be able to talk about there being like one pain teacher or one experience, in my experience, it's been sort of the way I describe my life is like, I get an idea and I step forward, and when I hit a wall, I turn left or right. And so I think that in many ways, being highly sensitive and empathic, like I am, and I imagine you are too, it's been like I feel things and have felt things much more quickly. There's that song by John Lennon, Instant Karma's Gonna Get You. And it really feels like, for me, my life has been a life of instant karma, and where a lot of people had been able to sort of kick the can down the road. By the time I was 23, I was really bottoming out. I was really, really struggling with a pretty serious eating disorder and sugar addiction. And I had already hit my wall. I was already going, what I'm doing is not working. Yeah.
And Jennifer, let me ask, the things that you were doing that were not working, did they happen to be, how can I say this nicely? Lessons
Don't worry
and
about being nice.
all right, I'll go straight in.
Yeah.
Projections.
Just be blunt.
I believe, but did they happen to be projections from family or culture or religion? Like, I guess what I'm asking is, often we hit a wall and we aren't doing the things that are aligned with us because we think we have to fit into a certain box.
Absolutely, and especially I think more so at the time that I was really struggling with this, even more so then than now. The restrictions of what it means to be female in our culture, and especially around body image and weight, and around love. But I also, I was at a point in my life, if I think about sort of the first pivot in my life, which was around the time I was actually sort of the precursor to the pivot was a car accident. But the first real pivot in my life was when I was about 23 years old. And I had no boundaries. I desperately wanted to be loved. And the way that I thought I could be loved was by being like fitting into this visual ideal of what a woman is supposed to look like and be like, but also by being really a people pleaser and, not to find a point on it, a very codependent, like very much about like being in that place of trying to meet other people's needs. So I think that it was a combination of social pressure and sort of the boxes that I was trying to adhere to, but then also a lot of misconceptions about what health and love and good adult relationships look like.
So thank you for sharing that, my friend. And that was my suspicion, and I feel you. I'm obviously in a male body in this incarnation, but I can definitely relate to a lot of those themes, right? And I think a lot of the female listeners of this show can definitely tune into and see those boxes that you were fitting yourself into as the boxes they are currently or have in the past as well, right? But that's what, when we go deeper into this episode today, I would encourage people listening to, become the observer, right? Just from this chat today, you might see a box that you're in that maybe you didn't realize you were in, and you can now make a choice to step out of it, right? And that's the powerful piece. Jennifer, let's get into it. I'm excited to get into all things being an empath and highly sensitive here today. I think where I want to start is let's start surface level. And let's maybe set some definitions and understandings, and then we'll go deeper. What, in your perspective, your experience, how would you define an empath? What is an empath in your world?
Thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge that right now the word empath is being used everywhere.
Yes.
It's becoming very, very popular. It's become kind of a buzzword. And depending on who you're talking to, it can really vary quite a bit. So my personal perspective and sort of definition of an empath is that an empath is, well, for one thing, being an empath is on a spectrum. And on one side of the spectrum, there are the people who are completely oblivious to anything and everything that is going on with anybody outside of themselves, like where they are so self-interested and self-absorbed, one might say, just completely disconnected, that they just kind of chug along in life. And sort of the absolute extreme might be somebody who'd be considered a sociopath or a psychopath, like somebody who is just really like no regard for any other human beings. And, I'm sure we can all come up with public figures who kind of fit that description, but, Anyway, so we've got that side. And then on the other side is what I call the extreme empath, or the person who is a true empath. And that is a person who is picking up the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, the sensations from the world around them. But what I find defines or makes somebody truly an empath is that not only do we absorb the thoughts, feelings, energy, and sensations from the world around us, but we feel them and experience them as if they are our own. And the thing is, you can have psychics, you can have mediums, you can have people who have a great deal of, intuitive ability, who are receiving information in the same way that an empath is. But the thing about these other abilities and people with clairs is that they can generally discern what's theirs and what's not theirs. But what I think makes an empath unique is that we experience things through our sensory filters, and we experience them as if they are our own. So some people talk about like Clair Sentience and how that is.
Jennifer, let me jump in here because I want to get
Yeah.
to that next, because that's my next question. So put a pause there for a second because I want to ask.
Excellent. So I was reading your mind before you even said it.
Your Clairs are already going.
Mhm.
So that's exactly where I want to go next. But before I do, let me just ask a quick question here with the empathy piece. So a lot coming through. So first of all, I definitely resonate with that. The other end of the spectrum of just, taking on all the things and being highly sensitive and taking it on as your own. And I know as a, again, just some labels here, but as a light worker, as a healer, as someone that's in this world all the time, working with people, that it is something we need to be very mindful of, right? Because when as I'm sure you're aware of, when I do a healing and I'm in their energetic field and doing Reiki or doing a meditation or whatever it is, right? I personally need to be mindful of when I leave that session and how I'm feeling, right? How I'm feeling, and okay, what have I taken on, either consciously or unconsciously, that is not mine? So I guess before we get to the Clair Senses, because that's a very important chat I want to have, what are some ways, because I know other people probably wanting to know this, much like myself, what are some ways that we can start to clear and distinguish between some of the energy? So for example, one of the tools that I use is, the chakra system, right? And cleansing through the chakra system. So what comes up when I ask you this question?
So first off, you have just asked the $1 million question, and I have literally written a book about this question.
I can see it.
Because the thing about this is that this is a question that has a number of different pieces to the answer.
Yeah.
And so what I want to say is that, first off, what I personally really had to look at when I was noticing that I was taking on my clients' stuff was that I really needed to look at how had I been taught to do this healing work? How was I doing this healing work? And in what ways was I climbing into the energy systems and the energy bodies of other people and putting myself in a position where I was taking on and absorbing more than I needed to? So one of the things that I have found is really important for those of us who are naturally gifted as healers is that it's really important to start noticing how are we doing the healing work, and are we doing essentially like full immersion healing work where we're kind of jumping into the deep end of the pool with people and finding ourselves in over our head. And when I personally first learned about doing empathic healing work, it was as a very little girl watching a Star Trek episode, like First Generation. There's an episode called The Empath. I have talked about it a lot because it was so influential, but it was demonstrating what I was taught, the first way I was taught to do energy work, which was you lay your hands on somebody, you absorb all the pain like a sponge, you take it into yourself and your body, and you transmute it, and you sort of take the hit for that person. That was what I was taught. And so I really had to first recognize when I was going places I didn't belong, and when I was engaging in behaviors that were more than was appropriate as a healer. And one of the things that I found was really, really important was recognizing when my need to rescue was impacting my ability to serve. And the thing about highly sensitive empathic people is that because we pick up the distress that's coming from the world around us, we feel better when the world feels better. So it's very understandable that we're going to want to rescue people if they're in a state of distress. But this is especially true if we have not done our own personal work on our distress. And so anytime we're around people who are experiencing distress, we get triggered and activated and are, spinning out. But
Jennifer,
I hope,
yeah, this is so, this is so good. You're speaking my language, my friend. No surprise here, but this is
not surprised either.
This is like the self-love work, right? This is so it's funny what you're describing about, going out into the world and saving the people. I refer to it as the superhero archetype, right? Mm-hmm. It's the archetype, and we have many different archetypes that we fall into throughout life, and this is one of them, right? And then and I say this not as someone who see this from the outside. I see this in myself, right? You're speaking straight to my soul, Jennifer, when I do these kinds of healings. And when I catch myself in this energy, I'm like, oh, okay, this is where a line needs to be set. This is where, and we'll probably talk about this later, the boundaries that we set, not just between us and the other person, but between different layers of our consciousness, right? Between, how much healing have I done? Where is this need that is, originating from a need I need to meet for myself, but it's now, because it's easier, like you're saying, projecting into the outside world to fit that need. So it's asking the question, maybe you can tell me if this resonates, asking the question, is this truly a need I need to project onto another person to help them? Or is this actually something I can feel myself? Is that something we could ask?
It's absolutely something we can ask. And I think that, for me, one of the big questions, like there's two questions that I generally ask when it comes to noticing that something is up and that I'm feeling some kind of empathic overwhelm or something. And the first question I ask is this mine? And, I'll put my hands over my heart and I just ask myself, is this mine? And usually, most of the time, the answer is both and. Like I'll get a yes, and there's also stuff that's coming from outside of you. And every so often I'll get a nope, this really is about something completely unrelated to you. But most of the time it's kind of more of a yes, and it's also other stuff too. And then from that question of, is this mine? I then ask the question, what's mine? What's not mine? And there are times where I do believe as healers that people come to us with resonant issues.
Yes.
That the reason they can help us, but also the reason we can help them is because we understand what they are going through and we can relate. Like there's a resonance to what we have to offer. And so what I always ask myself is the question, is this, like, am I the person to serve this person? Is this an appropriate thing for me to be helping somebody with? And is this something that I have enough distance, I have enough detachment, I've done enough of my own work on that I can do this work? So, for example, I had a friend who was setting up a pro bono service for nurses who were working in the hospitals and who are on the front lines with COVID, and basically offering to provide tapping support for nurses who are in this position. And what I realized was that I have a number of reasons why it's not appropriate for me to be in that role. One was that I come from a family in the human service field and healthcare practitioners, and I have many nurses in my family, including a mother who was a nurse, and stuff around my mother's, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying of, like, the worst patients are nurses and doctors. I will attest, the worst patients are nurses and doctors. And so I knew I had my own transference and my own issues about my mom's relationship to her stuff. But then my father actually was within the first, like, 10,000 people who died from COVID. And so I definitely have some real personal feelings about the whole thing. And I knew that until I had really worked through these sort of big personal things, I would not necessarily be able to effectively detach and provide service that was going to come through really clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jennifer, I love this "is this mine" tip here.
Yeah.
And this is so powerful. And I actually use this when I talk about ancestral healing. So it's a very similar sort of thing here. And I think what I've learned from it is, and you're explaining it beautifully, is it helps us to distinguish and get into this whole world of frequency, right? And what is because I say this to everyone listening, the people for new people to this world, right? We have our own frequency. We are unique soul expressions for a reason, right? And within that unique soul expression, we have our own unique frequency. So we, as the interpreter, taking in these energies, we can get to a point, and this is, I'm right here in this journey right now, where we can distinguish, oh, this frequency is mine, like Jennifer was saying, or this frequency is connected to my ancestral line, or this is a completely different. This is an outside person, an outside element. And the more that we do this, the more that this frequency muscle starts to build, and we start to have a sort of a map or a library of what would be the word, source points that we're going, oh, that's what this is, and now I can draw a line here.
Right.
Jennifer, let's go back, because there's so much coming through, and I want to hit on all of it. Let's go back to the Clair Senses and the empathy, and because this is a big topic that I know I'm in at the moment, and I think might be a little bit confusing for other people listening. So
yes, well, and especially. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, all good. I'll set it up and then I'll throw it to you, because just to give context, because we could go in many different areas with this. In the system that I'm sort of in at the moment, and my understanding is, there are 5 main Clair senses, right, connected to our main physical senses, right, seeing, hearing, tasting, feeling, touching, examples, and then there is Clair empathy that people refer to sometimes. So I'll throw it to you. Maybe we can start between the question, what would be the difference between Clair sentience, which is clear feeling, and Clair empathy, which sounds like what we're talking about now? What comes up?
Actually, personally, I really think there's a very, very clear distinction between empathy and being an empath. And I believe empathy is the capacity to understand and grasp what is going on with another person, but there is still a level of discernment. And I really, and that's the thing for me, Clairs by their nature bring discernment. And we also have, so we've got the 5 sensory ones of, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairgustance, which is just touch, tasting, clairalliance, which is smelling. And then, clairsentience is one of those ones where I think some people sort of think of clairsentience as kind of like the physical sensation or the picking up the sensation.
Yep.
And some people, I think of clairsentience more in terms of more of that empathic sort of internal, almost kinesthetic experience. My sense of it is that people with these kinds of abilities, and then claircognizance is just sort of when you just know things. Yeah. And My experience with these is that with the clairs, we can distinguish the separation between self and other. That there is a sort of a sense of, I'm receiving this information, I'm not experiencing this information, I'm not feeling this information. Whereas being an empath, I find the challenge with, especially when we're new and being an empath, is the fact that you're like submerged in it. It's an immersive experience. So I would be inclined to say that Clair empathy is still creating a distinction between self and other. And actually, what I've been realizing, especially over the last year or so, is that many empaths actually need more empathy. That ironically, being so highly sensitive and empathic, often we experience things as if they are our own. But because we are in crisis, experiencing the distress, it's actually very hard to have empathy for somebody who is experiencing it in reality. And so I'll give you an example of one of the places where I kind of went, wait a second, like, you need to have perspective here. And that was right as the war broke out in Ukraine. There were all of these images of like people fleeing their cities with like their cat carriers and their dog on a leash. And I was experiencing so much sort of empathic overwhelm from the distress that was coming that I was visualizing, like I was having these images of myself walking down my own street with my beloved pug Lilu and my two cats, who you can sort of see right behind me. But my two cats, in cat carriers. And all of a sudden I am there. I'm experiencing it. And while that is, allows me to have this level of sympathy and this level of compassion and to grasp what's going on, where the line of empath and empathy was that I was losing perspective about the fact that I am a white woman living in the United States in an environment where I am safe, I am protected, and my reality is that all is well in my world. And what I think can happen sometimes is for empaths, we get so lost in the feeling, we don't actually have the ability to distinguish or say, while I can really empathize with this and I can imagine how hard this is, I am not actually going through this. And I think empathy allows us to recognize that another person is having an experience that we are not having. Whereas being an empath, often we experience it as if it's our own. And
so I love this, Jennifer. This is a perfect distinction here. And I think, and you were sort of explaining it, I'm not sure if you intended to add it in, but it also sounds like the clairs themselves, the other ones, can come in to help with that distinction, right? Because you as you were explaining, you talked about that seeing the voyance of that image that you had, and that while it took you deeper into the empathy, I think we could also go the opposite end, right? So I'll share my example with this. One of the ways that my clairsentience activates is when guides come in, and they'll move through. I'll get goosebumps, or they'll move through sensations that I'll have. And when I'm sort of putting myself in your shoes within that situation with the Ukraine, my clairsentience would help me make that distinction, right? If a guide would come in, right, I'd pick up the clairsentience and I'd be like, oh, there's someone here that's maybe helping me put this line, right? Have the feeling, have the understanding, get the message, but now be able to take a step back to do something about it. Is that
right?
A good interpretation?
I love that interpretation, and you drew something out that I had not even necessarily realized, is how we can start tuning into our clairs and recognizing them to help us distinguish and to help us see the differences between what's going on. What I will say, though, is that I have noticed that when an empath is in a state of utter distress because they're spinning out with having absorbed just all the pain, and especially if there is trauma in the past that has not been dealt with and has not been acknowledged and had not been resolved, and this can run back multiple generations. And we could have a whole other conversation about ancestral healing, because ancestral healing is my jam too.
We're going to trauma next.
Yeah,
Don't worry,
we'll
my
go
friend.
there.
Keep going.
But what I was going to say is that I find that when we are in that spinning out place as highly sensitive empathic people, and if we're noticing that we are feeling distress, that tuning in, actually not even tuning into the clairs, but simply tuning back into the senses and giving ourselves a reality check about what is going on right here, right now, can be really, really helpful to start dialing back and really focusing on kind of helping ourselves to sort of like back that truck up and not find ourselves like just spinning out with awareness of like imagining ourselves in Ukraine. And so I really love using sensory awareness on a very visceral, physical level of, okay, so, and often I'll either start with smell, because smell is such a, deep, like it really goes right into the lizard brain, or I'll start with sight, because it feels to me like that's kind of the most obvious thing for us sort of, like modern civilization people. And what I'll do is I will look around and I will start noticing what I am seeing. Like I will start telling myself, I see, like I've got a statue of Our Lady, the Blessed Mother, of the Sacred Heart, like right in front of me. And then I've got another, and then I'm looking and there's like a wall hanging of the goddess Kuan Yin. And I see this candle with a label that says love on it. I see flowers that are right in front of me. So I start orienting myself to my environment. And if things are really intense, I'll even do this thing that I've recently been reading about, where you like literally count colors. So you just sort of pick a color, maybe start with red. And like I see this, one red candle, one red ribbon, one red rose, one red dress on the thing, one red heart, and then going through the different rainbows and just doing this. And then, going to sound. What am I hearing? I'm hearing the sound of sort of the hum of my earphones in my ears. I hear you agreeing with me. If I was listening really carefully, I can hear actually the white noise generator coming from upstairs from my husband's office. And so we start tuning into what we're hearing. Then it's like, what are we feeling? What is the sensation on our skin? What is the feeling of the surfaces beneath us? What are we smelling? What are we tasting? And really coming back to the physical sensations. From that, then we might be able to, if we have developed our clairs to some extent, then we might be able to actually use our clairs to recognize what are we picking up on that is not within ourselves, but where we're having a clairvoyant perception of somebody walking down the road or something.
And making a choice at that point too, yes. Jennifer.
And making a choice.
Yes. That's the big part. So thank you for that breakdown. And I think there's a lot of elements in here, but for everyone listening, this is what I want you to sort of lean into here, is that I think even as empaths and as sensitive people and as people that are sort of moving through our Clair Senses, sometimes we can feel like we don't have a choice, right? We can feel like these beautiful gifts are igniting in us, which we deserve to have them ignited, right? But we can get to a point where we can sometimes feel like they're overwhelming, right? We're on the other end of the scale, like you set up at the start of the show, where it's just we've switched one on and now they're sort of coming through as a waterfall, right? So I want to encourage everyone listening, all the beautiful audience out there, remember your power of choice in this. And that beautiful experience that Jennifer just talked about with all the different senses, that is really helping us back to that choice, right? Through the overwhelm, through the intensity of it, to remember that choice that we have. Jennifer, let's move on here, because there's a couple other topics I want to hit on, and you alluded to it before, and this is a big one that I want to make sure we get in here today. And it's the role of trauma in this whole conversation, with being an empath, with the sensitivities. Now we're talking about the Clairs. So I'm wondering, let's start with, how does trauma impact our path as an empath in your perspective?
So this is such a rich piece, because there are people who actually believe that trauma is what causes people to become empaths, and that the experience of, especially ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, create a tendency towards hypervigilance that then has us really, really open and receptive and sensitive. Now, I just want to say that you could have a family of 3 children growing up in the exact same environment. One of them is an empath and 2 of them are really good at compartmentalizing. I actually really, while I do think that trauma can exacerbate and can stimulate our sensitivity, I believe that trauma does not cause it. Because if a trauma caused it, then everybody on this entire planet would be an empath. Because there is, at this point in time, with 5,000 years of patriarchy and like the impact of sort of agriculture and capitalism and all of the things that have been happening to us as a species, there is so much trauma that has been passed, like kicked down the line, that nobody escapes it. And so
and Jennifer, let me jump in here, because I think this is where you're going to go next. I would reverse it, right? And I would say that in my experience, and we'll probably talk about this at the end of the show, but of course we have our own individuality, right? We have our biochemical individuality, and that also applies to these senses, the empathy, all of it. But they're there inside of us. These abilities, these beautiful sensitivities are there from the start. However, and this is maybe what I would love to get your perspective on, if we have ancestral trauma specifically, so I go to things like Atlantis or the Salem witch trials, where certain mystical beings were persecuted for their empathy, for their Clair senses, then the trauma in itself, while it's not causing the sensitivities and the beautiful abilities, there is a sort of a dampening or a fear that's stopping the expression. Would you agree with that?
Well, and I mean, the term that is being used a lot more nowadays is the witch wound, and it is, and I think that, and the thing is, I believe that not only do we have the inherited ancestral trauma, and I would say not if we have it, I believe we all have it. Like I don't think it is, and the thing is that there's more studies now where there's actually information and evidence that trauma is inherited through our DNA, that it is passed forward, that it's not just an energetic thing, it's not just a woo thing, but that it is a reality that we are. And there have been studies that have been done that are saying, if trauma is experienced in a previous generation, you do not have to have even heard the story to have a response to these things. But then there's also the karmic stuff, the past life stuff, where it's like some of us are coming in. And so, yes, I think that there is that aspect of it as well, where it's like, and then you add the whole social culture of you're overreacting, you're taking it too personally, you're being too sensitive, get over it, stop worrying about it, you've got an overactive imagination, you're just being weird. That I agree, there is a way in which between ancestral trauma, karmic trauma, and social pressure to not be magical and to not be sensitive, there's also that tension around being empathic, where I think a lot of us really do try to shut that down.
Pause there for a second, Jennifer, and
Yep.
then I want you to continue because I can feel your heart in this one.
Yeah.
I've been feeling it in all of it, but it's super passionate here. Just a distinction to help people maybe start to learn the differences between the ancestral, the past life, in this experience. In the system I sort of am trained under and I share with clients, we have a subtle energy system, right? And we have different subtle energy bodies, right? So the ones that audience members can probably relate to already is we have a physical energy body, we have a mental energy body, and we have an emotional energy body. We can understand that piece. But we also have two others, the genetic energy body and the DNA energy body. And this is where in our energetic field, those ancestral wounds and those past life wounds, they're actually two different energetic layers of our being. So just to plant that seed for people listening, know that you can start to distinguish between these different layers of what you are, and you don't have to do it all. You can just decide one day, okay, I'm going to go into meditation and I'm going to focus in on my genetic body, or I'm going to focus in on my past life body, or whatever it is. So just so people don't feel overwhelmed.
Yes.
Keep going, my friend, with what you were saying.
Well, so, and I also just want to say that in my experience, a lot of times, whether it is inherited or it is karmic, just start addressing it and the answer will come. Like a lot of times it's like whether it was that I had a great grandmother who was persecuted for being a midwife and an herbalist or a witch, or if I'm remembering my own experience, I don't think that matters as much as addressing and clearing it and healing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you give them what you're ready for too, right? It's like continue, keep going.
I wanted to actually circle back around to the word choice, because you were talking about this idea of choice, and you mentioned something that I really wanted to hold up, because I've heard this, and I'm sure you've heard this so many times, is like how so many empaths feel like a victim to their gifts and feel like they don't have a choice. They feel like they can't control it. I cannot count the number of people who have written or commented or said they feel like it's a curse to them. And what I want to say is that in the same way that if you do not have the tools or the knowledge or the information, then you don't necessarily have a choice about it. But once you do, then it's about approaching things in a really different way. And so what I guess I would like to say is even the idea of introducing that we have a choice is revolutionary, in that I think so many people don't even know that they have a choice. They are just flooded. And if somebody is the empath in a family system, in a dysfunctional family system, and they are the designated feeler for people who are suppressing their emotions and pushing them down and not dealing with them, in many ways, there's sort of a family contract that's been playing out where people are accustomed to playing the role of being the one who is processing the emotions for everybody else. And so getting to that point where we even recognize that we're engaged in this dynamic it can be a complete game changer. And within the empathic mastery system, my system is much more complicated than just put up a bubble of light and send thoughts and, send white light, like bubble up and send some white light and like love and light all the way out there. Because what I discovered is that before we can address anything, we have to recognize. And so the first step of empathic mastery is recognize that, and the recognize is twofold. The first part of recognize is even recognizing that we're experiencing empathic distress, that we are going through something, that we're out of sorts, that we're not feeling, that we're not in our baseline. Like I'm imagining myself walking down a road with my dog instead of sitting in a room, like having a conversation with you, facing a Zoom, facing a computer screen. So there's that level of recognize, and then from then we can start to really do the recognize work, which is discernment of what's mine, what's not mine, is this mine? Only after we've been able to recognize, though, can we come to the next step, which is release. And release is where we start using energy healing techniques, where we start maybe using like cognitive shifts and, behavioral decisions, like all kinds of different ways to release. It could be energetic, it could be, doing therapy with somebody, it could be journaling, but where we start to work on releasing the stuff that we've been carrying around. Because one of the things that I find the problem with the idea of just put a bubble of light up around it is that if you're already carrying a ton of distress, it's gonna impact your filters and shields from the inside out. Like, you cannot protect yourself if you're already carrying around a bunch of distress.
And that distress is attracting, right? So so I'll jump in here, Jennifer, because this is a really big point in itself too. And I thank you for those steps there, and there's that distinction. And I think what I'm starting to really appreciate about your beautiful work in the world is the nuance of this, is the professional sort of deep nuance, and how, we're not just lumping everyone into one category, right? We're putting people into their own individualized expression. But just going back to what you were saying, if we put up the bubble, then yes, we're putting a line in the sand. But we're also not asking the question, why am I attracting this energy, right? Because we talked about the resonance piece, and we know that we can attract resonance from a space of light, and we can attract resonance from a space of darkness, right? So why is this person with this specific energetic frequency and resonance coming into my world? We need to be willing to ask that question, and we can ask that question once those boundaries are up, once we're detached, right? We feel safe, we feel protected. But then I would encourage people, if you have the energy and the time at that point, go deeper and ask, okay, am I attracting from a resonance of light here, because like attracts life, or is there a piece in me, like you talked about the curses and the thought forms, the ancestral trauma? Is there a piece in me that I now need to bring attention to, so now that resonance is not there? Now I shift it from the negative into the positive polarity. Right. Does that resonate, my friend?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when I am doing work with people, what I try to cultivate within myself is curiosity. And so when I go into doing work with people, there is a part of me that is the curious observer. And if I notice I'm getting pinged by something, I've been working and doing this work for a long enough period of time that if I recognize that I'm getting triggered, I have a capacity to ground, detach, and sort of put it up on a shelf. But what I do then is I basically say to myself, whoa there, little buckaroo, you got some work to do about this, because that really set off some red flags within you. And I completely agree that we get to look at, not only is it just about protecting ourselves, but it's also about exploring, why is this resonating? Because I was having a conversation with some of my students actually just the other day, where one of them had done some work with somebody, and they were having their client had a childhood memory about being excluded, and my student was really triggered by this particular thing and was having a very hard time shaking it, and was experiencing quite a bit of transference. And what I commented about was that probably they needed to look at where in their own childhood experience or their family experience is there a whole thing about exclusion, neglect, rejection, because the way they were reacting to the situation was disproportionate to the situation. And I was commenting that I'm sure there have been many experiences where they've worked with clients where they've shared deeply traumatic stories, like things that are just like, oh my God, that's horrible. But they didn't have resonance. And so it was able to just flow. And that's, for me, the difference. It's like, if something goes, like there is just hearing somebody's story and feeling deep compassion for the fact that somebody has endured something absolutely awful, but there's this lack of squirminess to it. It's
Jennifer,
love.
it's the difference between, so that you're making such a beautiful distinction here that I want to make sure people get. It's the difference between the law of resonance and the law of reflection. So the law of resonance is like attracts like. And what you were just talking about, you connect to that person because there's been a part of you that has healed that piece. You're compassionate because, oh, I've been there and I know that. The law of reflection is that triggered response. Is if someone, like I always use the example, and Dad, if you're listening, I love you very much, but I use my dad as an example. If I walk into a room with my dad and my dad is angry, but then as soon as I walk into that room and anger is triggered in me, I can ask myself the question, did my dad give me that anger, or is my dad through his anger reflecting the anger that is unhealed and needs to be seen inside of me, right? So that is the distinction here, resonance and reflection. And it's that triggered response that can usually tell us where we are in those two spaces, right?
I love the distinction between these two words of recognizing resonant. Are we experiencing resonance with something, or are we experiencing the mirror and the reflection of something that is unhealed within ourselves? I would imagine that my immediate thought as you were talking about you and your dad is like ancestral. It's like how like that, and a lot of times, especially if you see patterns running in families, like I generally am just like, yep, that's the marker for, certainly a marker for ancestral stuff. So
that's why I love this work.
So there
Jennifer.
with you.
That's why I love this work, Jennifer, because there's so many. There's these layers just really make it so exciting to just dive
and it
through.
makes it so yummy.
Yes,
it's like there's just, I mean, it's like every single person is a tapestry with just a million threads or infinite threads, and there's and it's like, it's just so fascinating how it's all interconnected, and there are just so many different pieces to all of it.
The tapestry is the beautiful word to describe it. Jennifer, I have a couple more questions here before we wrap up, and I want to make sure I get into with you. And this next one is a big one, so let me frame it here. This work that we're talking about with empathy and being a beautiful, sensitive person and connecting into the Clair Senses, all of what we've talked about today, this isn't just me experiencing, Jennifer experiencing, or even us with our clients. This is a collective thing, and I want to just expand it here now. And the last few shows I've done, I've really got into this theme of this shift that we're all making as a collective together. We're not just individually doing these things. There is a group consciousness that is expanding through the world at the moment, and it's really changing the world in so many beautiful ways. My question for you, Jennifer, is, what do you think is the role of the empath and the highly sensitive person, maybe someone with these clairs as well? What is the role within the collective consciousness at the moment? And for someone that's listening to this that is feeling empowered, what are they doing just by being themselves that is impacting the collective?
So this is such an important question. And interestingly, I was off at a writing retreat a couple of weeks ago and channeled an entire book about the evolution of our species and how we are all awakening to our empathic abilities. And that basically, I believe that empaths are the next point on the evolutionary chain. And what I believe at the very, very core of our work is to feel. Our work is to be present and to not avoid, deny, or try to hide from the discomfort. Because my council, the council of we, that's what they gave me that name to make it easy for me. But what they basically are saying is that until all of us as a species recognize our interconnection as cells in the body of this earth and understand that we are all deeply interconnected and feel all the feelings, we are going to continue to participate in behaviors that deny or create separation.
Yeah.
And we are awakening. And so there's Ken Kesey wrote this, I think it was the 100th monkey theory, but, which the story of the 100th monkey goes back to this idea. Essentially, there's a certain critical mass that happens when enough people, enough beings know something where a new behavior is adopted. What I believe is that we empaths, those of us who are born and who are here right now, we're kind of like at the 87th, 88th, 90th monkey. And we are the ones who are proceeding, like we're the ones who are hitting critical mass. We're part of the wave that is going forward. And I believe that this entire last few years, but especially since the pandemic hit, that you can see more and more people are awakening to their empathic abilities. More and more people who are experiencing the discomfort of not being able to ignore or compartmentalize. And so what I would offer is our first role as empaths is simply to be the receptors, to be the frequency generators for what is truly happening on the planet, and to have the willingness to be willing to feel what is going on without avoiding it, without suppressing it, without denying it, without trying to make it go away. I also believe that as empaths, we have a capacity, and I believe that everybody has the capacity for empathy. Everybody has the capacity for magic. Just some of us, like in the same way that an NBA player is better at basketball than I will ever dream of being, some of us are more gifted or talented or inclined towards this. And especially right now where some of us already have the abilities and some people have not awakened to them. What I see is that we either have the capacity to absorb all the thoughts, feelings, energy, and sensations of the world around us and struggle with them, and therefore amplify the struggle, amplify the resistance, amplify the pain, and reflect that just, the sort of the looking through the glass darkly. Or what we have the capacity to do is bring ourselves up into the place of radical acceptance and radical love, where we can hold space for what is, but instead of contributing to the problem, what we do is we are able to support the transmutation of the problem, and we become beacons for light, for hope, for possibility, for healing. And I believe that every one of us, and I believe every one of you who is listening right now, you're listening because you are part of the solution and you have been called. And I sincerely believe that right now it is go time. It is all hands on deck. We are birthing a new world, but birth is messy. Don't let anybody tell you that it is not without danger, fear, and discomfort. And in order to navigate this birth of the world, it's like we are both being the one giving birth, and we are also the ones who are the doulas for that experience. But especially, this is where that detachment and that ability to discern, I am not in Ukraine. Like, if we are blessed to be living in places where the conflict is substantially lower, then we need to really work on keeping our perspective so that we can focus on grounding, we can focus on connecting to divine source, we can focus on being a generator for healing and love and joy and delight and pleasure. Because as empaths, we have just as much capacity to broadcast as we do to receive.
Yeah.
So, long answer.
Just know that it's beautiful, my friend, and I hope that hit the hearts of everyone listening. And just to add a little piece to this, I would really look at the name of this podcast that you're listening to right now. This is the Cosmic Love Antenna, and I could not have said a more beautiful description of the mission of this show than what Jennifer just beautifully highlighted. And this goes beyond just this topic today, right? The empath and the highly sensitive person with all of your Clair Senses and all these things we've discussed today. It is not just you standing in the power of those elements, right? When you stand in your love frequency, as you start to admit and be the beacon of light, as Jennifer highlighted, you can also do that in every aspect of your being, right? So whether you are a beautiful painter, whether you are a shamanic healer, whether you are I've done, at this point of this releasing this episode, 50, 60, 70 episodes now. Every single episode you can go and listen to this show. You can connect to the space that you resonate with your unique expression. So, for example, if it's not empathy today or being an empath, tune into the thing that lights you up, but realize that is the gateway back to your heart, right? And the thing that's underlying all of these elements is that frequency of love, right? And I think this is a wonderful place to end this, my friend. Before I jump to the last question I want to ask you here is, remember that when I say love and when Jennifer says love, we're not talking about the emotion of love, which is generally a powerful thing in itself, but we're talking about the embodiment of love, what we are made of, what is at our fundamental root center, right? You could call it your divinity, your essence, your godness, whatever name you apply. That is the space we go to. And when you're in that space, that is when you're emitting that frequency out, right? That is when you're connecting and channeling and being the empath and all of it. So yeah, Jennifer, we're getting heated here. I do have to run here in a second, but before we close up, two last pieces. One, if people have connected to your beautiful work in this world, they've felt your frequency, your space of love today, and they want to connect to you, they want to find out more, what do you want to share? I know you have this beautiful book behind you that you've been referencing. What comes up?
So first off, to access the full book, which is a 2-part book, the first part, Empathic Mastery, a 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success. You can find that over at empathicmasterybook.com, and there are links to all of the major markets for the book, so that it's not just a US-based website. Like you just look and you'll find all of the links. So empathicmasterybook.com. And part 1 is all about what does it mean to be an empath? Why are we this way? And then part 2 is the 5-step system of recognize, release, protect, connect, and act. So empathicmasterybook.com. And if you would like to get a free gift from me and sort of get started in my world and get some tools for how to navigate this, I have an ebook. And if you just go over to empathicsensitivity.com, you can grab it over there. So that's how to connect. Yeah.
As always, to beautiful listeners, if you go to the show notes, whether you're on Spotify or Google or Apple, you'll see the details of the show. And I'll put the links to Jennifer's store and book and all the things she's been talking about here today. Jennifer, last question here before I let you go.
Okay.
And you sort of, it's funny, you sort of channeled it already because you've been in my head this whole time, or most importantly, my heart. But I want to maybe hear a succinct version of it and what comes up. The name of this podcast, as I just explained, is the Cosmic Love Antenna. And for a lot of people, that love word there's a lot to it. But I'm wondering, how do you personally define that love word?
So I really, as you were speaking, I was thinking about, for me, love is a noun and love is a verb. And the noun is the feeling, the noun is the quality, it's the lower octave is the feeling you discussed, and the higher octave is that channeling of that sort of like that divine force that is everything. But I also really love to focus on and think about love as the verb, that it is a discipline, that it is an action, that it is a choice on a daily basis to come from a place of love, to come from a place of compassion, to come from a place of generosity. And I just want to say that right now, with the world where it is, and for empaths especially, it is so incredibly easy to get focused on the negativity and the toxic and the difficult stuff that's happening. And yet what is going to turn the ship around is not continuing to perseverate about the pain, but actually to really, really focus on love despite that. And I think that that's the thing for me, is like really thinking about, how do I live in the expression of love, the action of love. And for me, that is cultivating curiosity as opposed to reactivity. It is making it is really working to respond instead of react. It is about recognizing what my boundaries and my limits are and setting boundaries and limits, but also having the willingness to be radically honest with myself and with other people. And as well as to be generous from a place of surplus and generous from a place of resource, not necessarily generous from a place of guilt or because that's not real generosity. But there's so many different qualities of like, how do I express love in this world? And also just even cultivating that capacity to listen with an open heart, listen with an open mind, listen with open ears, but just really be present. So for me, love is much more the feeling and the quality and the experience. That's that's almost like the byproduct. But the thing that we need to do is deliberately, actively choose love as a path and as a discipline on a daily basis.
I got a lot of abundance vibes as you were sharing all of that, my friend. I got is just being in that space of love. It's abundant rather than scarce, and that fear mentality that's so prevalent at the moment.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. Jennifer, thank you for spending time with me today. I love you very much. You're doing the work. You're doing the work in the world that is needed today. I hope that all the beautiful listeners out there in the podcast world, I hope you gained some value, some insight. If you did, remember, share it far and wide with the people that you care about, even with people that, as we just said, are maybe new in your world. Share this as that token of love so you can maybe expand where they're at the moment. But until then, beautiful listeners, we'll see you next time here on the podcast on the Cosmic Love Antenna. We both wish you a wonderful evening, morning, and afternoon, and sending love and light right at you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Harrison on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Harrison Ma. That's Harrison, Meagher.